to Suits and Sneakers, a series featuring sage advice and candid conversations with seasoned leaders from diverse backgrounds and styles. I'm your host, Carrie Tuttle. With my guests, we deep dive into the areas of team engagement, motivation, and effective performance management. Get ready to be inspired and transform your approach to leadership. Please like, subscribe, or follow to be notified when episodes are released. Let's get started. Today, I'm thrilled to speak with Serge Boudreau, who has been in the talent acquisition space for the last 20 years as both a practitioner leading large recruitment teams at some of Canada's largest brands, but also has worked on the vendor side with Workopolis, Indeed, CareerBeacon, and now C-Squared Technology, where he leads global partnerships. He also co-hosted and produced the very popular recruitment podcast called The Recruitment Flex. And that went on for almost 400 episodes in 4 years. And he is now co-host on the HR Morning Show. Serge, welcome to Suits and Sneakers.
Well, thanks for having me, Carrie. This is an absolute honor.
Oh, thanks. Well, what's interesting, as I was looking at your career history, it's actually hard to tell what's work experience and what are passion projects. What made you passionate about HR and particularly recruiting?
I know it's really tough. I was actually looking at my LinkedIn profile and I've been advisor, consultant, different podcasts, and they're all to one goal. I'm very passionate about the talent acquisition space and I do as much as I can in every avenue to try to get kind of my claws of a deep understanding of what works, what doesn't. So yes, absolutely accurate. And it's kind of like, to answer your question, when we talk about what made me passionate, I don't think anyone starts in recruitment wanting to be in recruitment. It's one of those things that you kind of fall into. And I think there's a lot of those roles, and definitely was the case. But I learned something really early in my career that I really followed is like, get really good at something and
Mm-hmm.
you will become passionate. And I think we sell a lot of young folks of just follow your passion. And I'm like, that's not always the case. Sometimes you just have to kind of master something. Not saying that I've mastered talent acquisition, but that's what I'm working towards too. In doing that, it's kind of giving me the passion for this industry that I didn't have when I joined. Like when I first joined into talent acquisition and doing a recruiter job, it was a job. It was a way to make money. I had to feed. And then became really good at it, or at least I think I became really good at it. And then it just became a passion and something that I'm deeply ingrained and I could not see myself doing anything else now.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that because you're right. We start out and we think, oh, it's just a job, but usually you can find some aspects of your job that you really, really like and you want to do more
Yeah.
of. So, yeah, just encouraging younger leaders to look at those pieces is a really great piece of advice. So, I can't even decide where to start, but maybe some trends that are going on in the recruitment space. Be it AI or other trends that you're noticing that leaders should be aware of.
Yeah, it's I'm glad you're asking that question because it's something that's on my mind right now and it's a really challenging time. So in recruitment throughout the years, there's really up and down cycles. Companies are hiring, the economy is great, recruiters get hired, there's a lot of hires, then suddenly the economy flips, recruiters are the first one to get laid off. And it becomes really challenging because if you're not hiring, you're not going to have recruiters. But there is one trend that is happening right now, and I think AI is really the driving force behind it. It's the amount of applications that are coming into employers is at a level that we've never seen before. And one of the challenging aspects of it for talent acquisition departments, recruitment firms, is the majority are not qualified. And this, I really do think this is driven by AI and the what we call lazy apply tools, where you can literally apply to 1,000 jobs within hours. And it's really creating a lot of noise for those recruiters and those recruitment departments because suddenly, how do you go through 1,000 applicants where 998 are not even close to being qualified? So that's causing a huge issue and it's causing challenges for candidates, honestly, because they're getting lost in the shuffle as well. So those legitimate candidates that have the qualifications for that role that are applying are somehow getting lost in just the sheer abundance of applications that our companies are seeing right now. which is completely different than it was 2 to 3 years ago. Because the challenge 3 years ago is people literally could not find anyone for any type of roles. But don't get me wrong, there's still a massive skill mismatch out there. There's still a lot of roles being advertised, and there's still a lot of challenges in filling those roles. But last couple of years, it's been challenging for talent acquisition just
Mhm.
because of what AI has and just the noise that it's brought to the system. And obviously, companies have tried to adjust, have built their own AI tools as well, which I would advise that we have to be very, very careful.
What kind of AI tools are they building though? Like what specifically are they trying to accomplish with that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is the candidate matching. Trying
Mm,
to find people that are matching the job description and leveraging AI or algorithms to kind of connect what's the information in the resume and what's on the actual job description. And the challenge we have with that is, and this has been a challenge forever, job descriptions have been crap for decades and centuries, right? Like we are
yeah.
very bad at writing job descriptions. So you get a bad job description, and resumes can be mediocre, and you're trying to match that.
Mhm.
Then you add in the element of, well, AI is great, right? We all leverage it in our business, but AI actually making hiring decisions is a very slippery slope, and we have to be extremely careful because instead of bias, like we all have a bias when we hire. I think we can all agree, and we do everything to minimize those bias if we're aware. But what happens if there's a bias with the AI algorithm and suddenly it's bias at scale, which is a major challenge? And I think we're kind of in a period of digging in deep and just realizing that there's going to be a lot of regulations that are going to come with this. And we're starting to see that in the US.
Mhm.
So it's all these tools being built. Are you actually going to be able to leverage it based on what the regulations are going to be in the different states or in the different province here in Canada? And it's really kind of the Wild West right now when it comes to that. And I think it's going
Yeah.
to shape in the next couple of years, but there is a lot of overall noise in the whole ecosystem of job advertising and everything. So that has been the biggest trend. AI has really taken over our space, but now we're kind of taking a step back from AI to see like, okay, are we doing the right thing here?
Hmm. Well, and I've been digging into the AI space a little bit
Yeah.
myself, and I know some recruiters are also using AI to write the job description to make it less crap,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so maybe structurally and content wise, it looks good and it's got some of the keywords that you're looking for, but is it actually specific in describing what the job entails?
And I agree. I think so. The job descriptions have been so bad that I
Hmm.
am welcoming AI to help write job
Okay.
descriptions. Like I have no issues with that. But let's put in context of what AI is going to write. It's going to try to write it in a way that is based on what thousands, millions of companies have posted very similar jobs in the past. And you're still not really creating that differentiator of why they should work for your company. Because to me, a job ad or a job description, there is a difference between a job ad and a job description. But what you're putting out to the world is a job ad, and that is your number one recruitment marketing tool. And where we kind of fail in our world is we look at traditional consumer marketing or B2B marketing, and we kind of have that Instagram versus reality. We're a great place to work, and we're putting all these hyperboles in there, and reality, like the goal compared to B2B or B2C consumer marketing is you want to sell as many widgets as possible. In our world, and I think this is how you should approach it, is like it's also where candidates should exclude themselves. So if you are real about what it is working there, so you've got some great things and you should highlight that, but also the things that, hey, actually, you are going to work weekends, you are going to put in extra hours to get this accomplished. put it out there, because for
Mm-hmm.
those folks that are okay with that and see the upside of the things that are really good at your company, they're going to look at those and be like, I can't do that because I have kids that soccer during the weekend. I'm not going to be able to work Saturday. You kind of exclude yourself and you're removing that noise from the system. So companies don't do a good job of giving that realistic picture of what it is working there. And that will be forever a challenge, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. And if you're saying that most job descriptions or job ads are crap, and then AI is pulling from that as a sample, it's kind of garbage in, garbage out, right?
Yes. And
Yeah.
imagine this. So AI is creating the job ad, and then AI is fixing your resume. So now we've got AI against AI. I think we will see an AI bot interview an AI bot within the next couple of years. I think we're going to get there. And it's probably already happened, right? I don't know if you've seen some of the tools where it's an actual AI generated bot that is interviewing candidates, and it's so realistic. Like if you saw, maybe the best example is Reid Hoffman, the CEO or the founder of LinkedIn, did this, like him and the AI generated bot of him talking, and they were so similar. That's
Ugh,
happening in recruitment right now, which is just crazy. Like, let's not go there.
it is. That is crazy. And it is a mindset shift, because I think leaders in the past, you were describing a few years ago, where they didn't have enough applicants.
Yeah.
And so now they're like, woohoo, we have all these applicants, but then the frustration settles in, and trying to figure out who's actually a real candidate is a real challenge. So for newer leaders,
Yeah.
how would you suggest that they approach the hiring phase? Like, let's say, actually, we'll separate this, because let's
Yeah.
say they're not using a recruiter and they're
Yeah.
trying to do it themselves, and then we'll go into the recruiter part.
Well, I think there's also, depending on where they're at in building their business, because I think your
Mhm.
recruitment strategy definitely changes as you kind of grow, and your needs are going to be different, and how you approach recruitment is going to be different. So I'm going to start with that new leader, that new entrepreneur that started his business. It's been a 1 or 2 man-woman show. And now he needs to start scaling and needs to bring in people to actually grow the business. That is a different recruitment process than that company that has 500 employees and they're hiring 100 people. So for
Right.
that new entrepreneur, I think where we get really stuck is we're trying to do too much, leverage technology. Don't start there. I think you have to look at a couple different things. The main thing is, how can I leverage the skills that I have and do it more? And where a lot of entrepreneurs do is like, oh, we need more sales, so I'm going to hire a sales leader. But the fact is, that was their skill set. This entrepreneur is a really good salesperson, and it's the reason why they need to hire, because their business is growing. So instead of just looking at immediate needs, you got to look of how can you scale this and how can you leverage your skill sets and remove the things that you're not good at. So instead of hiring that salesperson in that case, you should probably looking at, well, if I remove all the admin burdens, that would give me more time to get in front of more clients. And suddenly I'm having a way bigger impact in my business than hiring someone that doesn't have the same passion initially, is not the entrepreneur doing sales for you. I'll use that as an example. But when you're early in the process, this is where culture is so critical, because that first hire is going to have either a massive impact on your business or is going to have a negative effect. So I know we talk about culture fit and culture ad in our industry. Culture fit has kind of become a bad word.
Mm.
But when you're early in the process, you got to make sure that their mission is aligned to what you're trying to achieve. And your goal, and as an entrepreneur, is to make sure that their vision fits within yours and they see your vision bigger than what their vision is. Because if their vision is bigger than yours, you're going to lose them fairly quickly as they grow, learn the business in that sense. So I think the biggest thing you have to consider, what are the things that you can remove from your day to day? And that's where you look at hiring. That's the first part of it. The other part where a lot of entrepreneurs and new leaders is they're not very confident in their hiring decisions. And what they'll do is drag the candidates through 5, 6 interviews. Have anyone that has any work in your business or any involvement, interview them, and they look at it as risk mitigation. They're a little bit, and I see this in corporate all the time, right? As well, like no one wants to do a bad hire because it's going to look bad on them.
Yeah.
That's a massive challenge, because what happens, those top candidates are not going to do 7 interviews with everyone, including your mom and your sister-in-law, right? Like they have options in the marketplace. So you
Yeah.
got to move fairly quickly. But in saying that, you really have to dig into that candidate, not be afraid to make sure that they do fit with what you're trying to grow. Like, I think the biggest thing is like, don't make the process extremely long, make it quick, but don't hesitate to dig in deeper in your interviews. Really going in deep and doing great interviews is critical. And unfortunately, a lot of us are really bad at interviewing, and it's a skill set that every new leader or entrepreneur should learn as one of the first things they do.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we could do an entire episode just on that.
Yeah.
But since we're there, what are some really great examples of questions that leaders can ask their employees to learn more about?
Well, there is multiple ways that people have been doing interviews, and there's I guess different views on what works and what doesn't. And I think what we've seen a lot over the years is kind of situational interviews of like trying to see what they've done in the past to predict behavior. The issue is most of the time it's not very focused. They'll give me an example of a time that you had stress and how did you deal with it at work. You're just setting them up to give you a BS answer and lie. Like can you, at top of your head, think about, but if you can go really specific into something that they've done in the actual job that's going to have an impact or very similar to what you're going to do, you're going to learn a lot from their answer, because folks that have actually done it will go in such specific details to the ones that just said, well, I manage this project. In reality, they exchanged a couple of emails. They had no real concept in depth of that actual situation. And that happens a lot. So I think the more you can relate what the day-to-day is in the job that you're going in, that past experience, instead of being generic, will work a lot better, because you're really trying to figure out what makes them tick and like what they've done, like how they've succeeded and how they approach different projects. The other thing that I see a lot of new leaders do, and I strongly advise against this, is these pet questions that actually have no reasoning. And like, you have probably seen this with hiring managers or like even
What are the
executives.
worst ones? Give us the worst ones.
Oh, you're putting me on the spot, but I'll give you one that I had a hiring manager ask all the time. And it was for like admin roles, and it blew my mind because I could see it for an engineer. It's like, okay, you've got a Boeing 747. How many golf balls can you fit in a Boeing 747 without any seats or anything? And the first time he asked it, I'm like, this is like a coordinator, like this, like how are you aligning to what the answer is going to be to how they're going to do their job? Maybe an engineer, I get it, but for that type of role, I really don't get why that is relevant. But they've been asking that question forever, and I guess they're comfortable with it. But what I'll ask hiring managers in this case, and every leader should ask themselves, like, what is the right answer? What are you trying to get out of it? A lot of folks will say, well, it's just to see their reasoning, how they calculate things. That's not a real answer, right? Especially like if it's not specific to what the job is going to be. The other part of advice, and I think this has changed, and this is a personal on my end, you got to make it conversational. You gotta, you get a lot more from the candidate when they feel at ease, right? If you are on the attack or very no personality, they're just going to give you dry answers. So the more you can open up, build that initial relationship at the start, you are going to get way clearer, more in-depth response, in my experience.
Well, and you want to see their ability to build rapport with you and feel
Exactly.
that back from you, because otherwise, why would they want to work there if they think everybody walks around like robots?
Do you have a bad question experience? Because you've been a
I
hiring manager a
do.
lot in your career. Yeah. What's yours?
Oh, I had a colleague who asked everybody, "What's your spirit animal?" And I'm
Oh,
like, "What? Like, what does that even mean? And what does that tell you about the person?" I mean, it might be interesting conversation, but it tended to go off on a tangent, and we
yeah.
wasted a lot of time there instead of talking about something really relevant. It was weird.
That is worse than my question, actually. I think that's a
That's a bad
please,
one.
if you're listening to this and you've asked a question like that, please stop. Let's just
Yeah,
stop now.
just don't.
Don't.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's good fun though, sharing those stories. What do you say? So going back to the other idea of where you finally get it to, you've got three really great candidates
Yeah.
and you have an interview and they're all really well qualified for the job. And but some leaders still feel like they need to interview more.
Oh,
What do you say to them?
it breaks my heart every time I hear it because
Mhm.
I've heard that for 20 years in this space. And I think it's one of the most frustrating aspect of being a recruiter, right? Um, One of the things in how, as a recruiter or as a leader, that you should approach this before we even look at how do you deal with hiring managers on it is if you're doing a really good intake from the hiring managers of the key criteria they're looking for, and as a recruiter, you can match that. That should be the first step, right? Because you're meeting all the requirements. You have an in-depth half an hour meeting with your hiring manager. The flip side is for the hiring manager or for the new leader, if they're working with a recruiter, as an example, then we can use, they should want those meetings because it's one of the things as a recruiter is extremely hard to get hiring managers to commit to 15, 20, 30 minutes to go through the key criteria. There's just like, they'll send you the job description
Really?
and be like, here you go, deal with it. But there's so much context involved that you want to have that discussion because look, I don't want to be wasting candidates' time as well.
Mhm.
So I'm approaching candidates based on job description. It says this, this, and this. I find you this and this. And then the hiring manager comes back and is like, oh, actually, I was looking for this as well, this as well. And we've just wasted everyone's time. So definitely do that intake meeting at the end. But say you have I think the best answer is if you've done the hiring intake, I think they have to understand that this is just not posting a job on Indeed or a job board. Recruiters actually do a lot of work to get to that candidate that is qualified, and at least good recruiters are. I'm sure there's
Yeah.
plenty of bad apples that just post jobs and candidates come in and do a basic screening, then put them forward. But as you're working with either an internal talent acquisition team or external recruitment firm, if you're doing really good intake, it should never get to that point. If
Mm.
those three candidates are fitting, and it does happen sometimes, they're all qualified, but there's just something missing, right? There's just not that connection. And that's really
Mhm.
hard to convince hiring managers who, at the end of the day, are accountable for this hire to just go with that. So I think if
Mhm.
that happens, you have to take more time to dig in deeper of where those candidates are failing, even though technically they're qualified, and then come to an agreement. If I can find you one additional that fits this, will that work for you? You're trying to
Mhm.
get commitment throughout the whole process. It's very similar to sales, right? Like you are trying to get commitment. It's the same as a recruiter as we're dealing with a candidate. As you're going through the steps of the candidate, I try to get commitment at every step that, hey, if this is good for you and we're going to interview you, is there anything holding you back? Do you have a counter offer? Anything that should be aware? So you're never blindsided. And this is a good advice for new leaders as well. If you're doing the
Mhm.
recruitment directly, close throughout the process if it's a good candidate, because you will be shocked how many times you get to the last step. You're excited, you've got the right candidate, and then it's like, well, I actually have two counter offers and I have three more interviews, so I can't give you an answer now. Or the salary comes in play because you should be
Mhm.
talking about salary like way before the end point. And suddenly you're at the offer stage and being like, no, actually, I want, instead of 100, I want 130. That's your fault as a hiring manager or recruiter. If you haven't covered
Yeah.
that up and your offer acceptance rate is low, that's a challenge. So you got to be closing throughout the process.
Oh, you're touching on so many great things. So I was going to ask you like why a leader should consider using a recruiter. And I think you've given a lot there. And then the other piece is you're showing that parallel between the recruitment stages and like selling a product. You're selling you as the company and the job. So closing throughout. I love that.
It's so similar. If you look at recruitment and sales, they almost align completely the same, right? Because so you've got marketing that drives leads to sales. In our world, it's recruitment marketing that drives leads to sales as well. And the recruitment and the sales process are very, very similar, right? Across the board. So yeah, if you are in sales, and a lot of entrepreneurs and new leaders understands the sales process,
Mhm.
implement that into your recruitment process. You'll see it'll work.
What makes new candidates want to quit in the first couple of weeks of the job?
Oh,
Because
that's a
this
really
happens
easy
a lot.
one. It goes
Really?
back to what I was talking about at the start, where companies are giving an unrealistic view of what it is to work there, and suddenly that candidate is in the company and sees that was all BS. Like none of that is true. Like they're definitely giving you that Instagram versus reality. You see those pictures of, say, Lake Louise, beautiful, but then you see the backdrop. There's a million people there trying to take pictures. It's a
Yeah.
little bit what a lot of companies do with their brand, their employment brand, is they sell a picture that's not real. So when people come in, they're like, that's not what I was told. And sometimes it's just like little exaggerations, right? And sometimes I've seen, like, give you an example. If a company says, like, every day at work, you're going to be able to cuddle with puppies. There's a whole set of puppies. There's a room. Suddenly you're in your first day, and they're like, oh, actually, you can only cuddle with puppies 3 hours in a day instead of the full day that I told you. But you're still like, well, I like cuddling puppies, so that's great, but that's not what you told me. And now I'm in the job and I didn't accept the other one that offered 2 days of cuddling puppies, as an example. So you got to be so realistic because it's
Yeah.
going to bite you, and turnover is a huge issue, especially in the first 3 months. The other thing, and this kind of flows in the process as well, is how you onboard people. Too many examples, and this happens with new leaders all the time. They hire, and then maybe the first day they'll schedule a meeting, and then, oh, here's all the documents you need to read. And they'll leave them at their computer for days without even really checking up on them or giving them any uh, real feedback or advice and real training. I think a lot of smaller companies, a lot of new leaders do this all the time. Even little things, right? Like the experience, similar to onboarding a new client, is exactly the
Mhm.
same. If the experience of onboarding a new client is crap, that client's probably going to turn over really quickly. And it's the
Mhm.
same for an employee, especially an employee that has a ton of options. Like little things that come in, their computer's not ready on the first day. They eat lunch by themselves. This one drives me absolutely insane. And I've seen this in companies. I see that poor employee on their first day just sitting at the cafeteria or the lunch spot and by themselves. I'm like, is that a great way to welcome a new employee? So little
Yeah.
things matter, right? Like just make sure you've got the admin stuff
Yeah.
like down pat. Like you're executing on that. The employee starts in first day. But
Mhm.
people are people, right? Like that first day, that first week, that first month of just creating those connections with the employees internally are absolutely critical.
Yeah. That's huge. When I'm thinking about new leaders too, you mentioned they're not confident in their decision. How can they gain more confidence as they progress through the process of hiring somebody?
It's a good question because it's going to be different for many leaders. Some leaders are definitely going to feel that they do know it. They do even though it might not be true, right? Like they overconfident in their abilities to assess people. But also they're also aware of potential downfalls of making a bad hire. So it's kind of a backup being like, well, this person didn't work out. And like your fallback is like, well,
Yes.
Susie and Jim and Tony all interviewed and they loved her too. So it's not my fault. I think it's one of those things. If you can really have a clear picture of what success means in the role, and as you get experience in those candidates, you are going to grow that confidence. If you can learn to do interviews really well, going back to that and seeing those people in the situations that would apply to your work, you're going to feel so much more confident in those hires. And that's just going to grow because you are going to be a better interviewer. Better people are going to be in the company, stay longer, and that confidence is just going to come organically throughout the time. But interview as much as you can is my advice there.
Yeah. Do you recommend that a new leader do a practice interview, maybe with somebody internally, and just role play what that's going to sound like?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'm a big fan of role play, right? I'm a big fan of role play, especially in sales. And like in anything that you're doing, if you practice, it seems awkward. There's like many reasons why. When I say I love role playing, I actually don't, but I do it because I know it makes me better, right? And I think it's the same for interviewing. Especially with experts or people who have done it a lot more, they can kind of give you, especially as a new leader, there is a ton of laws and stuff that you have to be considerate of, right? Like you can't ask simple things like, oh, are you expecting children in the future, especially to women? Like things like that happen all the time with new leaders. And spending time with your HR or talent acquisition team to go through, first of all, like what is legally compliant, but also how do you interview and what type of questions bring out the answers that you're trying to find. Absolutely, you should be role playing that.
Definitely. And what sources do you recommend? Like if a leader wants to do a bit of research and prepare, and maybe there's checklists or tips, where's a good place for them to go?
Well, I have a couple of challenges in the marketplace because there is a lot of career coaches or company trainers that actually never were in recruitment, but do definitely put a ton of advice out there that might be or might not be true. I'll give you one that I think everyone in the space, when it comes to anything recruitment, should be subscribed to and always following as far as because it has so many different resources. It's called Recruiting Brain Food. It's a newsletter that comes out every Sunday, but also has this deep larder of database that is just everything that for interview questions, anything that you could look for in the space is easy to find. It's the one that I definitely look at. And the challenge here is also with AI, it's not a challenge, but with AI coming into place, there's the advice that actually ChatGPT gives you on different things is actually excellent most of the time. You still have to be aware, but the ability to pull info or things that you should look at from AI is not a bad thing. Like I definitely think the info is there and it really curates it fairly well.
So maybe you want to also make a plug for your own podcast. Your own podcast
Well,
has
the
the tips
podcast
too.
is on, so the recruitment flex that we talked about is on hiatus, but I am part of a very interesting show called the HR Morning Show, which is live every Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time or around 8 a.m. here in Mountain Time. We go through all aspects of HR talent acquisition. We interview practitioners. We interview folks that are vendors in the space, just to get an overall of what's happening in HR. And we dig in deeper to a lot of the things that we talked about today. So definitely recommend. I actually host the HR Weather segment part of it where I rant on something that's going on in the space. This week, I ranted about ageism in the workplace and how it's not something that we really look at, even though there is major repercussions that are happening with ageism, especially over 40, which is weird to say. I never thought
I
about it for
know.
many years, and now I'm over 40. So I'm like, yeah, that's right. Ageism sucks.
Yeah, no, and we'll put links to those resources in the show notes because I want to give everybody the opportunity to find those tips and have access to where they can go for credible advice on the recruitment space. So thank you for that.
And
What?
I'm always open. Carrie, sorry, didn't mean to.
Yeah,
Reach out to me. Let's put my info. I love talking about this stuff. Any advice that I can give, I'm more than willing. So don't hesitate. Reach out to me directly as well.
you bet. You bet. We'll put your contact info in there. But before I let you go, there's a question I have. What advice would you give to your younger self when you first started in maybe in recruitment, but also in leadership?
Oof. I think that advice changes as I go through because 10 years ago, if I asked, would have been different than it is now. And I think it goes to a little bit of um, where I started as far as like I've been in talent acquisition for 20 years. And if I had to do it again, I would have focused on the basics initially, really getting a deep understanding of the infrastructure of how everything flows, all the tools, the infrastructure, where I just did it right and it worked. It ended up working. I think I could have got to a space of where I am at now a lot quicker. The other piece of advice, which I think is not really recruitment related, but is the best thing that I ever did for my career, is to not be afraid to share my voice, to go out
Mm,
there, create videos, create a podcast, really create a brand for myself. um it's been massive for me overall because the type of opportunities that come from that, I am not that concerned about ever losing a job or not finding one because I do get approached a lot just based on that brand and that awareness, and also being on the sales side of the spectrum now. Not many people in my industry they'll take my call. They will listen to me because I'm a known commodity. They feel like they know who I am by the
mhm.
content that I put out. So for leaders that are not putting content and creating that personal brand right now, you are missing out on a massive opportunity. And the other massive opportunity there is LinkedIn. LinkedIn content is blowing up, especially with the advent of video, which is becoming a bigger part of it. There is a huge gap of content creators. There's more people wanting to consume that content than there is content creators. So there's still plenty of room. So creating that personal brand and putting your voice and sharing that voice out there is absolutely critical. I wish I would have done that 10 years, 15 years ago.
Yeah, me too. I
Yeah.
wish I would have done it sooner. Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. And I think a lot of leaders are really shy. I would think maybe you have another opinion, but I would think in larger organizations, people are maybe more shy to
Yes.
stand out
Yes.
than in a smaller company where you don't have as many people that you're sort of competing with for that stage. So, um,
And I agree with that. I think also it's like they're a little bit nervous. What will my boss or the CEO, if he sees it, how will they feel? I don't think like you guys stay within the lines, right, of the
yeah,
organization when you're working with a big one, but don't have that stop creating your own personal brand because there's many ways you can do it without really touching or breaking any barriers with your employer, right?
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And just elevating your profile, it actually raises the entire group, right? You all look better because of that.
And I'll tell you this, the reason that I got hired in this last role was based on the profile that I have in the marketplace. Like, no issues getting people reaching out to me directly. But when the founder was looking for this particular role, he's like, this guy knows a lot of people. He's a known commodity. I'm going to approach him. And it worked. So definitely do it.
Yeah. Awesome. Great advice, Serge. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next time on your podcast. So we'll share that info and I appreciate you being here today.
It's really a pleasure. And Carrie, we worked together right before I went into talent acquisition almost 20
That's
years
right.
ago. So this feels full circle. It's always a pleasure being on the podcast. You're doing a great job with it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Wonderful. Thanks for being here. Bye-bye. We're glad you joined us for Suits and Sneakers. If you want to be an expert guest look for the link in the show notes. Don't forget to follow or subscribe to be notified of future episodes.